Hello, NDC. Welcome. Welcome to my talk. Welcome to NDC London. And welcome to London. This is my home city. This is a hometown show for me, which is kind of cool because it means I don't have to go to the airport, but also means I need to travel in and out every day. Now, how many of you folks here, is anyone here, this is your first time visiting London? Anyway, because, London is an amazing city. I love living here. It's also a vast city. There are so many astonishing things to see and do and discover here. So any of you folks visiting for the first time, did any of you buy a guidebook to help you make sense of, you got a couple of days, what should you go and see and everything? Because a little while ago, I was like, I wonder how my city is selling itself to the visitors who come here to enjoy it. So I went on Amazon. And I did a little search. And I went on and I said, I'm going to see what's the state of the art with the London Travel Guide. So I punched in London Travel Guide, and I waited for the results, and I scrolled through, looked at a couple of different things. And, there's a couple, there's Rough Guides, there's Lonely Planet, and then I found this, the Essential London Travel Guide 2023 by Nash a Day. And I took a look at it. Now this, it's cheap. It's less than £12. It's got 4 out of 5 ratings. There's 62 reviews on this book. That's pretty good for a relatively up-to-date travel book and everything. And so I bought it. And I have a copy here, if anyone would like to borrow it. Now, I'd just like to read you a little excerpt from Nash a Day's London Travel Guide. Discover Westminster's hidden treasures. Embark upon a journey to discover the picturesque promenades, tranquil bodies of water, and avian inhabitants of the verdant and extensive estate of Hyde Park. Observe the ceremonial rotation of sentries at Buckingham Palace, the esteemed abode and governmental centre of the reigning monarch. This event shall commence at precisely 10:45 a.m. Ensuring timely arrival to secure optimal viewing opportunities, the estimated duration for the task at hand is approximately 2,700 seconds. It is advisable to peruse the website prior to attendance, as the frequency of guard changes typically amounts to a bi-weekly occurrence. Now, do any of you folks who are familiar with, London and the ceremonial tourist attraction, any of you know what they're talking about there? It's called the changing of the guard. It's been called the changing of the guard since 1667, when it happened for the first time. No human being has ever called it the ceremonial rotation of sentries. It's this thing. Now, I was curious about this, so I did a little digging. I was like, Nash a Day, I wonder what else Nash has written. And Nash has been prolific. Since the end of 2022, Nash has written travel guides to London, Paris, Rome, another one to Rome, a biography, an adventure through life, a book about how to make money with short-term Airbnb rentals, a woman's guide to weight loss and slimming confidence. Now, Nash, if you're out there, mate, click the bus. No click? I do not think that Nash a Day is a real person. I do not think that this book was written by a human in any meaningful sense of the word written. And that's what we are going to talk about today. We are going to talk about what is happening to our industry and to the world at large at the moment, at the point when suddenly you can go on the internet and you can buy an actual physical printed book that wasn't made by a human writer, and what the implications of this particular thing are. Now, something I am going to say right up front, OpenAI and general intelligence and artificial intelligence and language models, I'm not an expert in this field. There are people here at NDC who are. There are people who work on this stuff day in, day out. They build language models. They are doing AI research. I'm not one of those people. What I do is I look at technology and the way that it influences society. And I look at society and the way that shapes the decisions that we make in technology. And try to understand, from the inside of the tech industry looking out, what should we be watching out for? What should we be worrying about? What is this going to do to our career prospects, to our customers' expectations about the kind of systems that we build? And there is this moment. The reason why this talk is called Tipping Points is because it kind of feels like we're doing this at the moment. Like we've known this is coming. There has been artificial intelligence research going on since the 1960s. And it feels to me like maybe within the last 18 months is the point we go over the top of the roller coaster. Now, the first time you ride a real roller coaster, you get to the top, you look down, and your brain goes, nope, there is no way you are going to survive this. Yeah, shut it down, too terrified to function, and off you go. But when you've ridden roller coasters a bunch of times, you know you're not going to die. You know it's going to be all right. You know it's going to be a thrill and a very, very weird experience. And for a couple of seconds, none of your frames of reference are going to make sense. But you will come out the other side, and it will be all right. And AI is not the first tech roller coaster that I have lived and worked through. So what I want to do, I want to tell you about a couple of others that have happened in the course of my own career. I'm going to start with this. This photograph is from the Museum of Printing in Massachusetts. Does anyone know what this machine is? It's a scanner. This machine, if you wanted to get a photo into the computer in the early 1980s, you would buy one of these. This thing cost about $1 million. And it scanned photographs. You put a color photograph, you tape it on, you see in the middle of the picture there's this little spinning drum, you tape your photograph on there and then you switch it on. I've actually seen one of these in action once. When I was a kid, I did a visit to a newspaper office and they had one of these machines in the building. It took about 10 minutes to scan a single photograph. Most people didn't need photos in the computer because what was the point? The computer had an 80 by 25 text display. You couldn't look at photos on the computer. But if you had a digital publishing workflow, you'd put the photo in this end and it would come at the other end. Now, digital photography, today, no one needs to spend $1 million to get a photograph into the computer. We just kind of take it for granted. If you look at the sales of photographic equipment, film cameras and digital cameras over the last kind of 70, 80 years. Film cameras hit a peak around about 2000. 30 million film cameras sold. Then digital compact cameras came out of nowhere, and there was this massive spike. And you know what happened when we fell off the edge of that cliff is suddenly you didn't need to buy a camera anymore because you already had one. Because your iPhone or your Android or your Galaxy, Zoom, Pixel, whatever, had a camera built into it that was good enough for the vast majority of photographs that most people want to be able to take. But what's hidden behind the graph is a story. And the story happens here, and it's the story of the Olympic Games. Does anyone know where the Olympics were held in the year 2000? Sydney. Sydney, Australia. Now, the Olympic Games it's a big deal. It's also an interesting watershed, because it happens every 4 years. And 4 years in tech is long enough that a lot of things can have changed since the last one, but short enough that you can still draw meaningful comparisons. Every press organization, every newspaper in the world, they send reporters and photographers to cover the Olympics because it's big news. If you went to Atlanta, Georgia, United States, 1996, as a press photographer covering the Olympic Games, you shot on film. You spent the whole day taking pictures. At the end of the day, you would run to the Kodak Press Center in the Olympic Village. You'd give them all your film. They would develop it for you as fast as they could and charge you handsomely for the privilege. You go running back to your hotel room. You'd get your hand lens out. You'd look through all the negatives. You'd pick the best pictures. You'd put them in a Federal Express envelope, and they'd be overnighted to your newspaper office if you're lucky in time to make the back page of the morning edition, or the front page if your country had won a gold medal that day. Now, Sydney was different for a whole bunch of reasons. One, it's a long way away from, I mean, it's not a long way away from Sydney, but it's a long way away from everywhere else. It's a long way from most of the rest of Australia. And I know because I was there in December. The time zone is a massive factor. You cannot overnight FedEx printed film and negatives from Sydney to New York, to Washington, to London, to Paris. But also 2000, internet had kind of just got good enough to be usable. Now, there's not a lot of success stories about Australian internet, but this is definitely one of them. Hotels had a business center that probably had like dual line ISDN. You could get 100, maybe 200 kilobits, which was enough to send a couple of pictures back to your editor. But the third factor was this thing. This is the Nikon D1. It wasn't the first digital camera. That happened about 20 years before that. It was the first tool built for professionals. If you went to Atlanta 96 with a digital camera, your mates would laugh at you for bringing a toy to the Olympics. If you turned up with a film camera at the Athens Games in 2004, people were like, oh yeah, old school bro, still rocking it. But this was the tipping point. Because the Nikon D1, now this wasn't amazing. It was like 2.1 megapixel. It had a tiny little viewfinder on the back. But what the press and the photographers realized really quickly is that the analog photos weren't getting used, because the newspapers would rather have digital now, even if it's only 2 megapixels, than wait 24 hours for the airmail to arrive from Sydney. And so within a couple of weeks, all the pictures in the newspapers were all from this camera. They were from the Nikon D1. This is an example. This is John Whittaker riding Calvaro in one of the steeplechase events. This made the back page of the London Times, and that was it. That was kind of the end of part one as far as photography is concerned, and the beginning of digital. Now, the first digital camera looked like this. This is from the 1970s. This was invented by Kodak. I love the fact it's got a cassette. Like, look at that. It's got a tape. Because digital cameras are older than disc, and definitely older than solid state. It was a camera that stored pictures on a cassette tape. There's actually 2 of these still in use. They are both in outer space. Because the Voyager 1 and 2 probes, they both have digital cameras that use tape, because it was the only storage available at the time. So if you want, it's a bit of a journey, but you can still find these running in production. These days, as soon as the Nikon D1 came out, digital photography took over, massive amount of investment, 2 megapixels, 5, 10, 20. I have a bunch of these at home. This is the Canon M200. This is wonderful. It costs about £600. It takes amazing photographs. It shoots 4K video at 60 frames per second. I bought one of these to use as a webcam. That is how kind of commodity level photography has become. Now, the astonishing thing about all these sorts of tipping points is that in retrospect, they look obvious. You look back now, it's like, well, obviously people were going to stop using film emulsion and chemicals to make photographs. But Kodak, around 2000, Kodak was an industrial powerhouse. They had something like $3 billion in cash reserves. They had their own skyscraper, the Kodak Tower in Rochester, New York. If you'd gone up to the Kodak Center in the Olympic Village in 2000 and said, you know, Kodak's going to stop making film within 10 years, they'd have been like, don't be ridiculous, that's not going to happen. And he said 2 years later, Kodak's going to go into receivership and they're going to be bankrupt. They'd probably have thrown you out. But that's exactly what happened. Because what people don't appreciate, Kodak didn't sell photography. Kodak sold chemicals. Every photograph, you want to shoot some pictures, you want to board a reel of film, 24 exposure film, £5 maybe? So you're talking about 50 pence per photograph. Most of that would go to Kodak or one of their competitors. Then you need to look at your pictures. So you take it to a pharmacy or a photo booth to get it developed. They charge you to develop it. They use a machine that they bought from Kodak. They use chemicals they buy from Kodak to shoot onto paper that they bought from Kodak. Kodak's money didn't come from people wanting to take pictures. Kodak's money came from the fact that the only way to do pictures was chemicals, and they sold the chemicals. I kind of, back of an envelope, I reckon Kodak made about 15 cents from every photograph taken on this planet until the year 2000. Like, that is a huge pile of money. And as soon as we worked out how to do it without the chemicals, game over. Wikipedia now charitably says, the Eastman Kodak Company is a public company that produces products related to its historic basis in analog photography. Ah, the nostalgia feels, hey? But Kodak aren't dead. We're going to see them again in a second. Now, the other big tipping point that and I'm sure many of you lived through, was this one. MPEG Layer 3 audio. Now, MP3, the audio format, is older than anyone remembers because for about 5 years, it wasn't useful for anything. The format was created in 1991. But in 1991, there were no computers in the world fast enough to play an MP3 file because it took 15 minutes to decompress a 3-minute song. So if you wanted to listen to MP3s, first you needed a hard drive that could store them. We didn't have hard drives that big. Then you'd choose your song, you'd double-click, and you'd wait. It would decompress. And you finish, you're like, yeah, I can listen to it. And then you'd have to delete it, because now it's an 80 meg WAV file. So, OK, delete that, and then pick another one, decompress that. Not a great user experience. The Pentium 60 processor ran about 95, 96. This was the first CPU that could actually play MP3s. And then the Pentium 75, you could play MP3s and look at the internet at the same time, which was revolutionary if you spent most of your spare time in a room with a computer in it. For nerds, brilliant. For people working in IT, brilliant. College students, brilliant. Normal human beings, no. They listen to music in the car. They listen to music in the living room. They don't have computers in these places. The tipping point for digital audio was this. And again, this wasn't the first device. The iPod wasn't the first MP3 player. Shout out, anyone in here, the Diamond Rio? Creative Nomad? Yeah, serious niche nerd, old school. But this is the one that normal people wanted, because it had style. It was iconic. It had these white earbuds that people were like, oh, you've got the new iPod. What's it like? Where did you get it? Can I get one? And the thing that Steve Jobs had figured out, the thing which triggered the tipping point for this, was that the iPod wasn't just about a device that played songs. The iPod was part of an ecosystem that sold music. Now, the music industry, the recording industry, they thought they sold music. They didn't. They sold plastic. They put the music on discs and cassettes, and they put the cassettes in boxes and jewel cases and slip cases, and they put them on trucks, and they drove them all over the world, and they put them in the stores. And when you went to buy a record, what you would do is you'd go to town, and you'd choose a piece of plastic that you liked, and you'd pay money for it. And when you got it home, you'd put it on a machine, and it would make a noise. But the plastic was the thing you paid for. Our concepts, our understanding of ownership is so predicated in the day when the music was indistinguishable from the physical packaging that it came on. And it was Steve Jobs who sat the record companies down and went, look, stop freaking out. MP3 is not going to kill you. What if you could sell the songs without the plastic? What if your customers would give you 99 cents, and we'll take 30% because we've got to make bank, and you just give them the song? You don't need to put anything in a truck. You don't need to press anything. You don't need to print anything. Your manufacturing costs become zero, and you can just sell the songs. And that's what triggered the revolution. Now, the thing about the predecessors to this, what happened in both of these scenarios is that the cost of delivering something went effectively to zero. The cost of taking a photograph and then looking at it went from, maybe £1, 50 pence, whatever, to effectively zero. The cost of being able to acquire and listen to a song went to effectively zero. Obviously, the iTunes store takes a cut, but you didn't need the plastic, you didn't need the logistics, you didn't need the shipping. And so what happened is we eliminated this scarcity, we eliminated these constraints. Now, I was at an event in the Netherlands last year. One of the speakers there was this guy, David Foster. He founded a company called Artificial Intelligence Research Limited. He's based here in London, actually. And he had a quote in that talk that I thought was really interesting. He said, generative AI reduces the cost of human-like thought to near zero. And that really kind of struck a chord, because I'd already been thinking about, what happened when photographs became zero? What happened when music became zero? Wow, what if thought has just become zero? So we're going to do a little experiment now, folks. What I'd like all of you to do, I want you to think of a purple penguin. How much did that cost? I mean, maybe if you'd had a traumatic experience with a purple penguin, there was an emotional cost involved, but the thought doesn't cost anything. When you see there's a natural disaster, there's an earthquake, and all the celebrities are on X, formerly Twitter, sending thoughts and prayers, the people who just lost their homes are like, don't send thoughts, send cash. We need help. Thoughts are worth nothing. Thought on its own counts for zero. If we imagine that you're sitting on a train and you look out a window and you see someone on the station platform and they clutch their chest and they fall down, and you think, wow, that person might have just had a heart attack. If you do nothing, you're a psychopath. And if we build a surveillance network that just taps into all the cameras in all the railway stations and just records the number of cardiac events, we've got psychopathy as a service. And unless we plug that into something that has paramedics and first responders, we haven't helped anything at all. Thought is not the point. Thought is worthless. But what we have now is we have a generation of devices and tools and technology that can turn thought into output, tangible output, as long as the output is on a screen or a set of speakers. We haven't quite got there yet. That's what I found so weird about this is a real thing. It's not a picture. It's not a sound file. It's a book I can touch. And that was what triggered this whole, like, is this the tipping point? Now, we can do astonishing things with digital media and screens and immersive technology. And any day now, Apple are bringing out their new, what is it, the Vision Pro, the Apple goggles, which is this going to be like the iPod moment for VR? Not for $3,500, it's not, but maybe we're getting close. But what we've discovered over the last few years, you know, the world has been changed dramatically by the pandemic. We did all these NDC-style conferences online for a while because we couldn't meet in person. And we worked really hard to make that good. And people put in time and money, they bought equipment, they rehearsed it. And what we realized is that even with the best enthusiasm and support and equipment in the world, this is never going to be as good as that. Because there is something meaningful about getting together in a room with a bunch of other people. The bandwidth, the conversation, the connections that you have vastly exceed anything that we can accomplish in a purely digital format. And this is where I want to go back to this idea about, you know, books as a tipping point. Because for most of my life, books are trustworthy. You see the people are do your own research, and you know, they mean go and watch a bunch of YouTube videos. Doing your own research normally means go and read a book, like a proper actual book with a leather-bound spine that you found in a library. Or maybe you go all the way back and you reproduce the experiment that was documented in the book and see if the book was accurate or not. But there are a whole bunch of people involved in the process of making books. There would be the author, there would be the researchers, there'd be the proofreader, there'd be the copy checker, there'd be the editor, there'd be the publisher. And every one of these people has a massive incentive to make sure the book is accurate, because if there's a mistake, fixing it is really expensive. You pull back all the books from all the shops, you put them in the shredder, and you do another run. And so the onus on them to be accurate and correct is why books have become so, certainly, you know, within my life, respected as a source of authority. Now, I ordered this book online. A machine sold it to me. A machine took the money out of my bank account, put it into another bank account. A machine printed it on demand. I don't think there's a warehouse full of these things because the paper quality is terrible. Come up and feel it afterwards. It's really awful, like it's a horrible book. I know one human being was involved in the process because I met the guy who brought this book to my front door. That might have been the only human being who was involved in the entire process. I know for a fact that the person whose job is don't make crap books was not involved, because that person has been eliminated. They've been eliminated because they don't scale. And companies like Amazon, they want to hit, you know, factor order of magnitude scaling, $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion. And the only way to go from $1 million to $1 trillion is to eliminate absolutely everything that doesn't scale. And unfortunately, that means us, humans, because we don't scale at all. We are these messy bags of meat, and we want meal breaks and toilets and unions and sick pay and fair working conditions and all these kinds of things that for a scaling algorithm are just a massive, unpredictable pain in the ass. Now, we're getting towards some kind of dystopian territory here. And I do not entirely subscribe to the notion that AI is going to turn into evil killer robots that wipe out all of the humans. That's not how I think it's going to go down. Now, there's a recommendation in my book. If any of you is looking for an interesting place to go and have dinner, there's a sushi restaurant called Sushi Samba, which is on the 39th and 38th floors of the iconic Heron Tower in Covent Garden. It's a map of London. This is us. We're down here. This is Heron Tower. This is Covent Garden. This is about a 45-minute walk. It's 2 miles through very, very densely populated downtown London. Big deal. The AI made a mistake. Well, you know, what's the big deal? We don't have sushi. All right, we're going to have to go and get something else. But what happens when we trust AI with something potentially more significant than sushi restaurant recommendations? Alongside this, there's a travel guide to Amsterdam. There's how to play mahjong. There's the ultimate guide to resistance band training. There's the Wild Mushroom Cookbook. A comprehensive guide to finding, preparing, and cooking with wild mushrooms. Now, the first giveaway on these things is that the names are almost plausible. Does anyone know anyone called Godson? Like, it's a plausible name, but it's not. I don't know any Godsons. There's another one, The Wild Mushroom Cookbook by Stephen McLaughlin, which is another, it's AI-generated text about how to find mushrooms. And if picking wild mushrooms isn't your thing, how about Normand Jackson's Guide to the Wildlife of Australia? Like something that is never going to kill you, because Australian animals are cuddly, right? And fluffy. It is not that Amazon wants to kill you. It's that keeping you alive doesn't scale. It's too expensive. And so you're going to be collateral damage in their trillion to bazillion dollar scaling. Now, let's talk about this whole idea of writing, because making a book used to be indistinguishable from the act of sitting down and putting one word in front of another. And I don't think writing is going to go away. I think there's a spectrum, and on the left-hand side, we've got people who write because writing is fun. Writing is creative. Writing is a way of structuring your own thoughts. I have all these tools that I use. I carry a paper notebook with me everywhere because sometimes I just want to sit and I want to write stuff, and maybe no one will ever read it because it's my diary of top secret cool stuff. And then the other extreme, we've got TPS reports. And we've got weekly status updates. We've got performance appraisals, annual reviews, final year term papers. We've got all the things that exist in our society because for a long time we've accepted writing as a proxy for intelligence, experience, wisdom. If you've got a class of undergraduate students and you need to decide whether they are actually philosophers or not, you're not going to do that by talking to them and then making a call, because one, you're scared of making the decision and being prepared to back it up, and two, people may disagree with you. It's too subjective. So you make them write an exam. And now we have a day where you can go on ChatGPT and go, give me 15,000 words on Kierkegaard's theories as applied to the Renaissance, and it'll go, yep, there you go. And it's getting good enough that most philosophy professors are like, the only thing wrong with this is I know the student isn't that bright. And it's like, see, you are prepared to make a judgment call. You just, And when I started learning to code, when I started developing, I was absolutely reliant on printed reference material because the web didn't exist. Unix systems had man pages, but you wanted to learn to program, you had a bookshelf that looked like this. Now, I found this stock photograph. There is actually a copy there of the Dylan reference manual. So I want to track that down, see what it says. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. But one of the things that ChatGPT and those kinds of tools, Copilot, actually do incredibly well is you can give them a chunk of code, and you can say, what does this do? And it will describe it. I take this. Some of you might recognize this. Some of you might not recognize this. I mean, it looks complicated, right? Let's punch it into ChatGPT. Hey, what does this block of code do? We'll stick that in, and it's going to go, this is a famous algorithm known as the fast inverse square root, or the Quake 3 square root. And it does a really, really good breakdown of what this piece of code is for, why is it structured the way that it's structured, what happens at each step of this. Now, this is just deterministic transformation from one set of language into a different set of language. It's translating from C++ into reasonably good technical English. And that's kind of a solved problem. It's just most of us don't like doing it by hand because it takes a lot of time, and reading C++ is not fun. Now, I saw a talk last year by the crew working at Stack Overflow, Joel Spolsky and the rest of the team there. And one thing they said there was really interesting. They said, when we built Stack Overflow, we knew that Google was going to be our user interface. We knew that a lot of people were going to get value from our site without ever actually getting to it because they were going to do a Google search, and the thing they needed would be right there on the Google page. And we accepted that, and we are now, Stack Overflow has a team of people being the next interface to our knowledge base is going to be tools like Copilot. Those kinds of things. It's going to be smart assistants running inside IDEs. And the kind of compelling premise, you go on Stack Overflow now, you could probably find the answer to your question, but it's maybe not in the exact language you're looking for. It's maybe the algorithm, and then you need to translate from Python into Java or whatever. Maybe the formatting style isn't quite right. Maybe their naming convention doesn't match yours. And so the next generation of Stack Overflow tools, they're trying to fix all that. You ask it a question, hey, how do I decompress an MPEG file in this? And it'll be like, here is the correct algorithm, matching your formatting conventions and your company's naming style and ready to drop in. And you're still going to have to read it to make sure it's doing the right thing. But, that's a big step forward in terms of productivity. Now, when you see the capabilities of these kinds of tools, if you're a tech journalist, you immediately go, clickbait, will AI replace software engineers? No. No. It will not. It might reframe what we understand software engineering to be. But MP3s did not stop people wanting to make music. It made it easier to make music. It lowered the barrier to entry. 30, 40 years ago, if you and your friends wrote a song, you probably didn't have the technology to record it. And you certainly didn't have the capability to publish it and share it with people around the world who might like to hear it. Today, any one of us can do that without even standing up. You can record it, you can put it online. I think that's amazing. It has made it more difficult to make a living as a musician, but that was never terribly easy anyway. Photography is not going away. If you keep your eyes open today and tomorrow, you'll see the NDC crew photographers around taking pictures. Now, there's lots of people taking pictures at NDC. You've probably all taken some yourselves. You're going to send them to your friends, maybe put them on Twitter. No one's ever going to look at it again. because those are easy pictures. Those are fun pictures that are part of the experience. You want good quality pictures that are going to form some kind of, use for marketing, promotion, historical record. You need photographers. You need people who understand framing and layout and bokeh and lenses and all these kind of things. And those are skills that are still in demand. They are skills that people are going to pay for. And when I think about, is AI going to replace software developers? The measure of a good software developer for me has nothing to do with how fast you write code. It's nothing to do with how many lines of code per day you can produce. It's to do with being able to look at the world around you and see an opportunity, see somebody who has a problem and think, hey, I think I have a way that tech could fix that. And that works at any scale. That's you looking at the person next to you struggling with an Excel spreadsheet and going, hey, did you know that there's this macro that we could build that'll do that? Or maybe you're building a collaboration platform for tens of millions of people. But writing the lines of code, that's just kind of the byproduct of this. Software development is an analytical problem-solving process. But the other reason why I think a lot of the tools we've got aren't going to go away, yeah, great. OpenAI is out there. We've got new languages coming up. Give it 6 months. And if anyone was in Steve Sanderson's talk yesterday about the next generation of WebAssembly, yeah, ChatGPT, write me a business thing in WASI. There, bang, done. But there are still going to be companies out there running C, C++, Pascal, COBOL, all these old school languages. Some of them are stuck with it because they have line of business applications that run their businesses. That's not going to get replaced. But some people are going to keep doing things the old way because they like it. This is a Super 8 film cartridge. This dates back to the 1930s. For about 50 years, if you wanted to make movies on a reasonable budget, you did it with this. This thing is terrible. It had no audio. The first generation certainly didn't. It'll shoot about 2 minutes of footage on 8mm analog film. It is an incredibly constrained format. It's also the format that made people like Spielberg and Tarantino fall in love with filmmaking as a medium. Last year, Kodak announced a new Super 8 camera. Now, this is the most wonderful hybrid device. It still shoots film on cartridges that will put 2 minutes of footage on analog film strip. It's got an HDMI viewfinder, it's USB chargeable, and it records audio onto an SD card. But what they wanted to do was create a device which gives you the flexibility of digital editing, but the constraint that the format imposed. If any of you's ever been out shooting, videos or promo videos or anything, you just shoot everything. You'll come home with 15 hours of footage on your SD cards, and then you have to edit it. You've got 15 hours of stuff to go through. That's a time-consuming, tedious process. If you get with one of these, you're going to end the day with maybe 10 minutes of footage, but it's going to be good, because you're not going to shoot until you've solved all those other problems. It makes you commit early to your own decisions in terms of composition and layout, and lots of people find that a really rewarding part of the process. Same kind of people are out there writing games by hand in WebAssembly because it makes them think about exactly what they're doing. Now, the whole idea, photography, it used to be you wanted to get a shot, you'd hire an illustrator, or you'd set up a really elaborate special effects shot. Now we can go on to, say, DALL-E, and we can say, hey, I want a picture. I want a ginger cat wearing sunglasses, riding a skateboard across a bridge at sunset, and playing a banjo, why not? And I've sped this up a little bit, by the way, but all the rest is completely accurate. Look at that. He's a cat, and he's got a banjo, and he's got sunglasses. It's just what we asked for. Let's see if it can do 3 blue circles. All right. In a triangular formation. OK, I guess that's what design. Can it do 4 blue circles? Ta-da! What do you think? Is it going to do 5? ChatGPT can't count. ChatGPT doesn't even know what numbers are. It doesn't care. They are tokens in a language model. If I go on here and I ask it to write the word computer without making any mistakes, it's going to write the word computer because it's a bit of a smartass. Let's ask it to draw the word computer without making any mistakes. Nothing fancy. I haven't told it a font. I don't want it on a bridge at sunset playing a banjo. I just want it to draw the word computer. And it's going to think about it for a second or two, and we are going to get this. Now, at a glance, it kind of looks all right. What we've got here is it started off with random noise, and it has repeatedly iterated it in a direction that brings it closer to some set of parameters that define what is and is not good enough. Now, most of the time, we don't care. Thank you, DALL-E. You've been very helpful. My mother raised me to be polite. My father raised me to believe in Rocco's basilisk. It can't count, and it doesn't understand that the word computer is letters of an alphabet which has meaning beyond just do the shapes look pretty enough to satisfy the model. That's all fundamentally that this thing is able to do. Now, a really weird edge case of this is it can't do hands, it can't do fingers, it can't do anything where you look closely at this, and you can now buy a product online. You can buy a rubber finger that you can wear when you do crimes, so that the surveillance footage will be inadmissible because it looks like it's been generated by AI, because it has too many fingers. That is some seriously out-of-the-box thinking. Now, the best example I've seen, like the thing for me that really helped me understand the difference between language models and actual comprehension and intelligence, was asking it to make clues for crossword puzzles. Now, this, by the way, this is what DALL-E thinks a crossword puzzle. You'll do your crosswords with Scrabble tiles, right? That's how we spend our Sunday mornings. We get out the Scrabble and the newspaper and we solve it that way. Something in the model thinks that makes... I mean, even the word thinks doesn't apply. Something in the model returns true when you give it that, as is this a crossword puzzle. Now, cryptic crossword puzzles, the thing I love about them is that at a glance they look like one thing. You take a clue, blue flower confused Neil. And you're like, yeah, I know what that is. I can read English. That's Neil. And a blue flower has confused him. But that's not how crossword puzzles work. Because crossword puzzles, you have to take the language apart and treat every single bit in every conceivable way and then put them back together in a way that makes sense. The answer to this, we're looking at it like blue flower, well, yeah, maybe confused there means I got to shuffle something around. I got to confuse some stuff. So let me try confusing Neil. I'm going to take N-E-I-L, and I'm going to shuffle that around a little bit. And I could get line out of it, but that doesn't help. I could get Nile. I know there's a blue Nile, like that's a river in Sudan and Ethiopia. And then you realize that it's not a flower. It's a flower. It's a thing that flows. Now, this is how crossword puzzles work. They require a level of comprehension beyond just kind of autocomplete prediction of what word comes next. So we're going to go over to ChatGPT. Now, what I'd normally do with this is I'd ask it to make an anagram of NDC London. The thing is that there are no anagrams of NDC London because it doesn't have enough vowels in it. The best I came up with myself was non-DLC nod, which might be someone like approving of not having downloadable content. So instead, we're going to ask it to write a cryptic crossword clue for Westminster, which includes an anagram. And it's going to go, yeah, twins emerge strangely in part of London. Okay, explain how that clue works. And it gives us a very comprehensive breakdown. The word strangely singles that. Anagram fodder, that is the term for this. The phrase twins emerge serves as fodder for the anagram, blah, 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 blah. But twins emerge contains a letter G, which does not appear in Westminster. It goes, oh, you're correct. I apologize for the oversight in the initial explanation. Blah, 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 blah. New terms wise up in London District. Terms wise does not contain the letter N. Do you want to try again? It is never going to admit that it does not know, because nothing in the training model is a bunch of people writing websites that say, I don't know this. I don't know. I'm going to tell the internet, I don't know. The models, this has no idea, like the underlying algorithms will not predict failure because that was not part of the data set they were tested on. It will just keep going, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, that didn't work, I'll try again, and this time I'll get it right. And it's absolutely, I mean, you know, we're getting to a weird point here. Like, if this thing is intelligent, if we're dealing with actual intelligence here, we are dealing with a narcissistic, lying sociopath that will not admit that it does not know what it is. I've worked with human beings like that, and they displayed some level of intelligence. I think we're done here. Thank you. Let's close that thing out. Now, this idea of what we call automated or artificial general intelligence, are we going to get to the level beyond that? And there was a really influential book about 25 years ago, 1989, no, 35 years ago. Roger Penrose, The Emperor's New Mind. Now, this book is very controversial. It's controversial when it came out. It's still controversial today. Penrose is a physicist. He's the guy who invented Penrose tiling, if you've ever seen the little mathematical shapes. And this book was kind of his deep dive into the state of artificial intelligence in the late 1980s. And he comes out with this postulation, like, we got to decide, there's one of three things going to happen here. Yes, we are going to get general intelligence, actual thinking conscious machines using digital computers. We just need to wait. 2, yes, but it'll need quantum computers. That's kind of Penrose's hypothesis, is that consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, and you are not ever going to be able to replicate it. Now, the reason it's controversial is people are going, you cannot run quantum phenomena inside a human brain. It's too hot and wet and sticky, which is literally the name of the counter-argument. But he's worked with anesthetists and other kind of weird cross-disciplinary stuff. The third one is no, it can't be done. Now, if it's a question of just wait, what is it that we're waiting for? What is going to be the point where digital computers suddenly yield general intelligence? Now, I absolutely believe we are not going to get there by building bigger language models, because I think it is fundamentally different. It's, to me, that's like the idea that you can get a motorcycle by breeding racehorses. You know, you breed racehorses, you get faster horses. But you get a point where the horses are never going to go any faster because they're still horses, and you want a motorcycle, that's a paradigm shift. It's a different kind of technology. You need to approach the same problem from a completely different perspective. Now, I'm not saying that tools like Copilot aren't going to help the people who are doing that, just like the people who invented the first motorcycle probably rode horses to work. It's going to help them on the journey, but it's not an instrumental part of the evolution of the technology. Now, maybe the problem here isn't whether general AI exists or not. Maybe the problem is whether society believes that it does. Has any of you ever asked your phone to marry you? You know, you're bored, and you're asking Siri to tell you jokes, and you're like, hey Siri, will you marry me? And Siri says,
can't. We'd have to change my end-user license agreement. A lot.
You're on flight mode, shut up. Yeah, there's all these little baked responses in voice AIs and everything. Now, there was a thing a few years ago, someone did actually marry their iPhone. A guy called Aaron Chervenak, he's an American film director. He married his iPhone in a apparently non-legally binding ceremony, but that happened in Vegas, and we can't learn anything from what happens in Vegas. But here's a scenario I want you to think about. This is Alice and Bob. And Alice and Bob, they just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Like, they're happy ever after, married since forever. And they're massive nerds. Like, they met on a Unix chat room way back in the 1960s, and they were on Usenet, and they were early adopters of CompuServe and America Online and the web. And they have an archive. They have a huge collection of every message they have ever sent to each other. All their emails, all of their WhatsApps, all the letters they used to write to each other, all of their chats. They've got all this stuff saved and backed up on a bunch of hard drives and in the cloud. Now, next year, Bob is going to develop dementia. And Alice is going to be making all sorts of decisions about Bob. When is the right time to put him into care? What are we going to do about all these things, his estate, that kind of stuff? Now, they don't have any kids. They have no family, no brothers, sisters. And she's thinking, after Bob is gone, who's going to make these kinds of decisions about me? And being a massive nerd, she takes their entire corpus of communication and she uses it to fine-tune an open source language model. She downloads Llama from Facebook. She feeds all that stuff in. She says, I want you to develop this. Then she goes to a lawyer and says, I want this language model to be my living will. This is my power of attorney. If I'm unable to make decisions, I want you to ask the language model. What's going to happen? She goes to court. The lawyer says, you're going to do this. Imagine something like ChatGPT being cross-examined in a court of law by a judge and lawyers who are deciding whether it should be granted sentient status in law to make end-of-life decisions about somebody. Or maybe you take an alternative tack and they say, this is a document. This multi-terabyte language model is actually just a very, very long piece of written text that we would like to be incorporated into this person's decision about their end of life. I have no idea what is going to happen on that day. But this could happen tomorrow. The technology exists. Somebody could train a language model on their own correspondence. They could hire the right kind of lawyer, and they could go before a judge, and they could start that process right now. What happens after that? I have no idea. None of us does. But the first kind of step towards digital sentiency and legal recognition of same, it isn't going to be some guy in Florida marrying an Android phone. It's going to be something like this. It's going to be somebody trying to get a language model recognized in court as having the authority to make legally binding decisions. Now, there's another presentation that I caught last year by Tim Berners-Lee, the web developer, the guy who created the web. And Tim is working on a project at the moment called Solid. And Solid, he's been talking about this for a while, because one of the things from, if you read interviews with him, he's kind of unhappy with how privacy has completely died on the web. And so much of our personal data now, we no longer have any control over it. And the Solid project is based on the idea that you keep all your data in something called a pod. That's yours, that's your stuff. That's your health records, that's your bank statements, your travel plans, your calendar, your credit card number, all this kind of stuff. And he's been talking about this for a long while without it getting a lot of traction. But what I think has suddenly brought this back to the forefront of the conversation is the idea that you could also have an intelligent agent running inside your pod that has access to your data, running on your infrastructure, controlled by you. It's not in the cloud, it's not somebody else's, it's your agent. The quote I saw in Tim's talk, imagine having an AI assistant that is like your doctor or your lawyer. It has your data, it works for you, and you trust it to treat that data confidentially. Now, we all use social media, right? Like, is anyone not on any of these platforms? And if you are, how did you find out about NDC? I'd love to know. We use social media, and we put up with it, because these are horrible websites full of horrible people, run by horrible people, but buried in among all the horrible is the stuff we actually want. You scroll through enough advertisements for products you will never buy and promoted posts, and there's one of your friends doing something silly. There's your brother out having drinks, and one of his kids has just learned to ride a bike, all these kinds of things, and we care about that. That's part of this meaningful experience. Now, let's imagine I decide I don't want to see the advertisements anymore. I'm going to build a tool. I'm going to use AI. I'm going to use language models and computer vision and everything, and I'm going to build the social media de-shittifier. And I'm going to train this on the stuff I actually want to see, and I'm just going to point it at Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and all those other things and be like, take out the ads, take out the noise, take out the politics, show me what my friends are doing in a nice formatted feed that I can read. Do you think this product would be shut down inside like half a millisecond by all these companies? Hell yeah, because I'm the product. I'm the thing they are selling. That's where they make their money. If I put something in the loop, which means they can no longer sell my attention to their advertisers, their business model is gone. And so a huge amount of time and money and effort is being invested in how to tell whether a network request, one request, came from a human being or a machine. Now, we are getting pretty close to game over as far as that is concerned. I went to sign into Steam a couple of months ago to play the new Quake Remastered, Quake 2 Remastered, which was awesome. And I got a capture. I was like, yeah, okay, boats. I got another one. All right, I think that's a traffic light. Oh, is that a taxi? It looks yellow, but I can't see the top. I got stairs. I'm like, this is getting a bit... At this point, I'm having an existential crisis. I'm like, what if I can't see it because I'm not human? You know, click all the images with humans, verify when there are none left. Now, it turns out Capture was just having a bad day, but I had to go through 9 rounds of verification. I've been on Steam for 20 years. They have my credit card. They know, like, Steam has watched me play all through Portal 2, and it's watched me play Kerbal Space Program. If there is anything else I could be doing to convince it I'm human. But the history doesn't matter, because my account might have been hacked 1 minute ago, and now someone is using it for nefarious purposes. And so we end up in this kind of sad reality of modern life that you are automated until proven otherwise. We are fighting this constant uphill struggle to persuade these platforms of our humanity because they've taken all the other people out of the loop. They're not there anymore. And so we have to jump through algorithmic hoops to verify our humanity. And a lot of them are just like, you know what? We're going to outsource this. If you've got a credit card, we are going to assume that the bank has done their due diligence. If you have a mobile phone, we're going to assume the phone company has done their due diligence. If you don't have a phone and you don't have a credit card, well then, sorry, you're not allowed to play on our platform because we can't be bothered to, maintain and curate these policies ourselves. Now, you're thinking, well, what kind of people don't have phones and credit cards? And you're probably thinking, it's the crazy people with the bunkers full of canned food and everything. People who just got out of prison. Somebody who went to jail in the 1980s, has been in there serving 40 years. They've served their time. They've paid their debt to society. They have been released. They are a free person again. And they're like, how do I find an apartment? And someone says, oh, you do it online. Now, they've never seen a web browser. They've never seen a mobile phone. These people exist. These are real people in our society right now. There was an article in NBC last year about a charity that exists to help rehabilitate released prisoners. And they're saying one of the biggest obstacles is so many things that we need, jobs, transportation, healthcare. They have shut down everything except do it on the web or do it on the app. And so if you are not comfortable with the web and the app, these things are closed off to you, and you have a hell of a job trying to get over that first hurdle. How do you get an email address if you don't have any of these things? because you can't get a mobile phone without an email address because they need to send your contract somewhere. And you can't get a credit card without an email. And, we ended this vicious circle where you assume that everyone kind of found their way in over the years. And so we can't tell whether these requests are coming from individuals or human beings. Maybe we need a different model. Now, one of the things that humans do and bots don't is humans spend money. And bots generally do not spend money because the people funding the bots don't want to risk them going viral and spending $100 bajillion. And I'm quite happy. I pay money for Prime Video and Netflix and Disney, and I like the fact that I go on a platform, I give it the money, and I watch the thing I want to watch, and it doesn't normally try and sell me anything along the way. They do a pretty good job of that. Why can't we pay for social media? Why isn't there an option to go on? Why is there not a social media platform where the only way to friend people is in person? So the humans verify the humans by meeting them and going, yeah, shall we connect? Yeah, LinkedIn has the whole my phone scans your phone. What if you could only do that with real people? What if we got to a point where the algorithm is like, oh, Dylan's Facebook account is being a little strange, and instead of locking me out until I solve the CAPTCHA, it pings 3 or 4 people that it knows I know in real life, and it's like, you think Dylan's okay? Like, I trust the folks in this room more than I trust Meta's algorithms to know whether I'm doing all right or not. And I mean, like, we'll check on him, he's probably tired. Or, no, that's just his new thing now. But, either way, it's a far more kind of, friendly, organic way of delivering the kind of experience we want. It just doesn't scale. Now, I'm gonna pick on British Airways for a little while. Because British Airways, I love their airline, I love their aeroplanes, I love their pilots, I love everything they do once you actually get to the airport and get in the sky. The process of getting there is probably the most broken website that I have used in the last 12 months. Because it just does not work with various kinds of credit cards, and I don't know why, and they don't know why, and they want you to make a phone call. And, I'm sort of thinking, there's all this stuff that is going on. And they're not the only ones, by the way. They're just the example that popped to mind when I was looking for something. Now, the things that I want, British Airways has aeroplanes. That's what I want. I want to get on a plane, I want to go somewhere. When I get there, there's a hotel room. I want to be able to go and I want to sleep in it. I want the food. I want the money in my bank. I want the Lego that is in the Amazon warehouse where they keep all the products. And we have sort of ended up at a point where so much of our interaction with the digital world, it's not the digital world we're interested in, it's the stuff beyond it, stuff on the other side. There is this layer of websites and apps that don't work properly between us and the stuff we want. And everyone's getting very excited about the idea that AI tools are going to give us new ways to manage that layer in the middle and make everything better. Now, an airline, why does an airline need programmers building a website? Because fundamentally, there's one thing that handles allocating the passengers, there's another thing that handles the payments. A hotel company, they got a system that allocates the rooms, and that's probably not theirs. It probably belongs to Amadeus or Sabre or one of the massive mainframe international booking systems. What if we had a world where these things, instead of having to hire developers and build platforms and keep reinventing the wheel for every company that wants a user login system, what if instead they just expose the data they need via APIs, which most of them already do, and I have my own robot assistant that goes out and hooks into all these things and gets me the stuff I want? Hey, go on, take money out of this bank, put it in that bank, and send me the Lego from the warehouse, without a website having to, or 3 websites or 4 websites having to be involved in the process. Now, this might be where we're headed. It might not. I don't know. One thing I absolutely guarantee is, even if we do go to this route, the thing in the middle, that smart assistant, it's going to be built by developers, by folks like us, writing code by hand with a little bit of assistance from Copilot and ChatGPT and whatever other tools are available. But fundamentally, I think the craft of looking at the world, seeing the opportunities, and what do we need to do to get from here to there, and making those things reality, that is going to be in human beings' wheelhouse for a long time to come. And I want to wrap up today by talking about something I think is really, really important, like absolutely vital to all of our professional interests. I want to talk about stickers. Because I love stickers. And I like designing stickers, and I like making stickers, and I have some stickers down the front. And from the number of people who are coming and checking them out, I'm guessing most of you quite like stickers as well. And one of the things I love to do is I like to take heavy metal band logos and turn them into silly nerd stickers, like UI UX instead of AC/DC. And my creative process for this is I'll have an idea, like, hey, what if I did the Metallica logo, but instead it says metadata? So then I need to figure out what is it about the Metallica logo that makes it distinctive. So I look at a couple of album covers, and I'm like, all right, there's a bit of variation. Sometimes it's 3D, sometimes it's not, but it's always got these little pointy bits on the M and the A, and I'll look for the letter forms, and I'll figure out what do I need to do. And there's no letter D in there, so I need to figure out what would a Metallica D look like. And then I'll open up Illustrator or Photoshop, and I'll draw it. And I'll come up with something and be like, yeah, I like that. Now, the nice thing about this is that the idea is normally perfect for prompting something like DALL-E, because it's a one-liner. It's the Metallica band logo, but instead it says metadata. So let's try it. And this is what DALL-E 3 came out with. Now, it's kind of on the right track, but it's missed the joke. It's like it looks at a glance like that, but if you look closer, neither of those actually says metadata, because it can't do words, because it doesn't know what words are. Now, I like them. They look good. They look cool. I like the color scheme. There's, it's put some ideas in there which I would find really inspirational if I was stuck on a piece of design work and just banging my head against a wall. But they're not right. It's not the finished product because it doesn't understand what makes it special. But I had this idea a while ago. I wanted the Guns N' Roses logo, but instead it says ones and zeros. And I tried that one on DALL-E, and it came up with Onis and Zoses. And now, again, it's not a million miles away. There is Guns N' Roses merch that uses these color schemes, but it's wrong. It's not the joke that I'm looking for. And so I thought, all right, let me see if I can put this together by hand. So what I did in Photoshop is I took the logo apart, and I'm like, right, we got this bit, and then we got that layer, and we'll put a shadow effect and the gold tint on it, and we'll put the font. I found the font is called Corvus Skyline, so I matched the text, and I put like a shadow effect on that. I needed a one that looked like a gun. And half the AI models out there will not draw guns, and the other half try, and they screw it up massively and come out with nothing usable. So I photoshopped bits of an old photograph of a revolver and made one of these and spun that around and wrapped that up in vines that I drew using Photoshop tools. And then I hit a snag, because I could not draw a rose. I'm not a good enough artist. I just could not come up with a rose that looked like a zero. And some friends and I have a Discord server where we had Midjourney installed. So I went on there. I was like, number 0 in the style of text, a single rose bloom red. And it came up with this. And I thought, bingo, that's it. So I cropped this out, and I dropped that in, and I came up with this ones and zeros logo. And I think that's a nice little metaphor, maybe, to end the talk on. So one, help yourself to some stickers. But as far as AI is concerned, it's useful. We can do things without it that we couldn't do before. But for the time being, we'll let AI do the roses, and the humans should probably take care of the guns from now on. Thank you. All right. I think we have about 3 minutes for questions. By which I mean we got about 2 seconds for questions and 3 minutes for answers. Or do we have complete enlightenment? Yo.
Are you familiar with Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman?
Yes.
I've been thinking about this, what Midjourney and ChatGPT can and can't do.
Yeah.
And it kind of resembles System 1 thinking, if you recall, which is it's